Why is sex so central to your overall well-being? Why even give a fuck about it? Hi, I'm Dr. Catalina, psychologist specializing in sex and relationships. And we're gonna talk about the centrality of sex to your overall well-being, how come it's the first thing to be neglected and thrown to the side, and how resentment of that for yourself and your partner leads to a lot of lonely relationships. So let's get to it. Our sexuality is our life force. Sex is central to our overall well-being. My research and the amalgamate of other research has showed that one question, how sexually satisfied are you, is correlated to overall quality of life, relationships satisfaction, sexual function, physical health, and emotional health. And even if you are asexual and not engaging in sexual activity, sexual satisfaction is around how we are connecting with our body and how we are choosing to connect with others. Our sexual energy is our life force. It's very much how we see ourselves, how we connect with ourselves. It's where we came from, and it's how we exist. And so much of when we think about sex is that sexuality is all encompassing. It is not just about the physical act of sex or sexual activity. And then intimacy can be physical, but it is also emotional, mental, concrete. There's so many different types of intimacy. And so I think it's really important for us to appreciate that our sexuality it's where we came from. It is our essence of who we are. And unfortunately, it's the number one thing that gets neglected. And when we think about it, it makes sense because it is at the essence of who we are, and our sexuality is at our core. It's our most vulnerable. It is our vulnerability. And when we are overwhelmed and life in, and we are in all of these oppressive systems that are constantly telling us what we have to, what we should be doing, it makes sense that our body, again, humans are social beings. It wants to be accepted, that it figures out, it learns really, really quickly, like before the age of 4 or 5, what it has to do, what it should be doing. And so that idea of want or desire, which is at the core of exploring and expanding our sexuality, gets curbed, gets inhibited, gets oppressed. And that's what capitalism, racism, and sexism, all of these isms, all do. They all teach us systematically to live like that. And absolutely our sexuality is impacted. One, because when people think of sex, it's generally an act. So it's just another thing to do, right? The reason it's just another thing to do is that in long-term relationships, people's sexual scripts actually become pretty vanilla or boring or same pretty quickly. Like pretty quickly, where our brains are efficient. Oh, this works. This gets them to have an orgasm, so we're just gonna go to that. And when your average sexual session is around 4 or 5 minutes for long-term heterosexual couples, let's play the math there. When the average orgasm for women, if they are having orgasms, takes around 12 or 13 minutes. And so that's why there's the orgasm gap in heterosexual relationships where men are reporting having orgasms and women aren't. Because there's not enough time to explore pleasure, sex isn't pleasurable. And I love when Emily Nagoski says pleasure is the measure. If you aren't having fun, you're just not gonna want it more. That's how desire works. And so on top of life already being stressful, and again, because we live in a capitalistic society where, and right now particularly, we are in this age where working harder and more, there's more and more pressure that infiltrates the relationship and absolutely the bedroom. And so if you're already not having great sex, then it's gonna be something that you're just gonna be like, whatever. And even self-pleasure, because again, to feel pleasure and to feel safe enough to explore that, your body has to feel safe and secure. It has to feel somewhat relaxed. Oftentimes, yes, absolutely, stress can be a sex relief, particularly if you are orgasmic. And so plenty of people will just masturbate or have a quickie. But unfortunately, over a long term, it becomes so automatic that too ends up, or your body ends up attenuating to it, and the pleasure from it no longer happens. That's why we need to keep on introducing novelty, right? Our bodies are constantly changing as we age and as we gain new experiences, it's going to require new ways, physically, emotionally, intellectually, to actually get stimulated, to create arousal. And again, in and out of the bedroom. Think about your jobs, think about anything, like your activities, even your friends. Our brain wants novelty, and unfortunately, there's so much like in relationships that just becomes so automatic, so outright vanilla and boring. Again, because there is some security in that, but that's life in general. Like if you don't continue to introduce novelty, pushing yourself, then and trying new things, continually edging, then life just gets pretty boring. And unfortunately, when it comes to sex, it's the first thing that is seen as, well, that's extra. And again, because the way sex, keeping in mind, in the patriarchy, sex is still, particularly in Western Christian countries, is for procreation. It isn't pleasure-based. And that is how the majority perceive sex still. And that is ingrained into society, in Western societies, particularly here in America. And so it's appreciating that. Sex does not exist in a bubble. And too often when you hear particularly sex educators or coaches talk about do this around sex or do this to fix your relationships. One, most sex research is done on white heterosexual couples and middle to upper middle class, and oftentimes in the States, and a lot of that research is older. So it's really keeping in mind intersectionality and that sex and relationships do not exist in a bubble. What happens out of the bedroom infiltrates what happens in the bedroom. And because of all of these oppressive systems of capitalism, of sexism, of racism, of all of these isms, those shape how we perceive ourselves, of feeling connected and feeling othered, and inherently how safe we feel. And the majority of the world is experiencing pressure. Most of the world right now is experiencing so much pressure. It's a privilege to actually be able to watch and have conversations like this, right? And so if you have that capacity, it's appreciating that privilege and actually nurturing and exploring it, because a lot of the world doesn't. But the reality is that I think in addressing sexual concerns and as an individual or as a couple, you have got to put that into the context, the socio-political context of that individual. And there is no differentiation. And too often, unfortunately, most clinicians and definitely a lot of coaches aren't actually trained in how to do that. And then again, on top of it, look at most of your therapists. Most of them are white, female, heterosexual, raised in upper middle class. And so inherent in that, I think that unfortunately, intersectionality isn't appreciated, and we are treating sex and relationships in a bubble. People need to assert their needs, wants, and desires out of the bedroom to improve their sexual satisfaction inside the bedroom. And in asserting them out of the bedroom, it's creating more safety. It's becoming an activist for pleasure, but an activist, period. It's giving a shit about what is happening, not just in your house, in your community, in your doctor's office, in the education system, in our healthcare, what's happening in politics. Sex is political. Relationships are political. Health is political. Politics is beliefs. Politics were designed with a capitalist, racist lens. That is the system in which we live in. And so for all of us, capitalism and racism affects everyone. All of the isms affect everyone. And so if we have the capacity to even have these conversations, to even have that space, that means we are safe enough to do something about it. And it is owning and honoring that responsibility and seeing the incentive as I want to live a life led by pleasure, not by shoulds and have tos. And I think the younger Gen Z and definitely Gen Alpha, that's what you're seeing. And then older generations getting resentful for it, rather than actually seeing it as, in midlife, this is an opportunity for a rebirth. This is an opportunity where you have a shit ton of resources and experience, and you probably also have some comfort. And now you have more capacity to now prioritize your sexuality and to then also activate yourself outside of the bedroom to change the world that is constantly oppressing you as well as others. The more we get involved, the more we give a shit. And again, capitalism wants us to be attuned. Media wants us to get numb. Jobs want us to get numb. That's why people stay stuck in a lot of different things. People get stuck at their weight, they get stuck in their relationship, they get stuck in their jobs. People get stuck. That doesn't happen because of laziness, it happens because of systemic oppression. We want that to shift. It takes individual action and assertiveness in your individual space, in your workplace, in your hospitals, and in your communities. And then that is what infiltrates and spreads and offers expansion in the bedroom. First and foremost, in relationships, it's important that because there's so many shoulds in life, that unfortunately sex can really be transactional and performative. That's shit sex, because it's about what do I need to do to make that other person happy? Not what do I want to do or what do I want to experience? What do I desire? And so first and foremost, it's really beginning to identify what actually brings you pleasure. What actually brings you pleasure? And again, to feel safe enough to actually explore that, your body has to get to a place where you actually are able to ground and regulate your nervous system so that it feels safe enough to begin to look. Think about when you're playing like any animal that is like burrowed in. It looks out a little bit, it looks a little bit, but it has to build up that confidence to actually explore, right? And it's the same thing with our bodies. And so to actually explore pleasure, there's all these things. You can go to erotic, you can go to sex toys, there's all these things, but it's missing this big step of feeling safe enough to do it. And that part of grounding and emotional regulation is at the core of so much. It's the core of that's where everything needs to start, right? And so it's applying a lot of somatic work, exercises and strategies there, and learning that so that you're actually beginning to shift how your body is experiencing the day-to-day. And this is why sex, and addressing sex with all of my clients, when they come in, they think that they're gonna immediately talk about sex and immediately just get into the bedroom and do those activities. And again, plenty of coaches, that's what people do. And the reality is that is not appropriate for most people, and it actually can lead to a lot of trauma. If you push somebody where they are not ready to go, and that's the problem with it's why self-help books don't necessarily work. We learn experientially, but we change in a relationship. So everyone's body actually needs to begin to actually try new things and have another body be like, that was awesome, good job. That felt good. And then you get to actually relate and that's why a therapist and a therapist's job is to be the grounder, and whoever is supporting that, it's that relationship that is actually the vehicle for change. And so when you're working with couples, so much of that is it's a triangle, and the therapist is the grounder, co-regulating with each of the partners, And so in this container, it's a lab, it's a wonderland to begin to actually explore sexuality, explore the shadow sides, and actually begin to nurture those, integrate those parts, because great sex is whole body sex, whole self sex, it's whole brain sex, it's wholeness. So, feel free to subscribe to this channel if you're wanting to learn more. You can join my email list. I'm the Intimacy Doc on all of my channels, and I will be having more and juicy events. So I go live often on TikTok and maybe some other platforms. So just keep an eye out. The Intimacy Doc. Give us a follow.